Welcome to our webinar. We'll be discussing today the federal rollbacks of the clean energy tax credits and how they're impacting Illinois workers in clean energy development. We're really excited to share perspectives on the future of clean energy in Illinois as these tax credits expire. I'm joined today by Jonathan Hettinger, the communications director at Climate Jobs Institute, and we have a number of panelists that we're excited to introduce later in our webinar today. Just a few housekeeping items. Please remain muted and with your video off for the first about half hour of the presentation. We'll be opening it up to panelists during the second half, and at that point, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. And towards the end of the presentation, we will open it up to questions from the audience. And we are recording this and we'll be posting the video later on our website. So today we'll be starting with a little bit of context on clean energy development and workforce in Illinois. Next, we'll share some findings from our report on the federal tax credit rollbacks. We'll next move to a panel discussion and then end with some questions from all of you. I wanted to start just by celebrating the tremendous progress that Illinois has made in clean energy over the last couple decades, but especially the last few years. We now have 6.2 gigawatts solar installed capacity, 10.3 gigawatts wind. A lot of the solar has been developed over the last 5 years. Since CEJA has passed, we've gone from about 1 megawatt solar to nearly 600 megawatt solar in just a short amount of time. And I think we can take a moment to celebrate the progress that we've made in clean energy and renewable energy development, as well as energy efficiency, electric vehicles, and other technologies that the state has invested in. Along with this growth and development, we've seen a growth in clean energy jobs. This data here, I won't go over it in detail, but it's from the U.S. Energy Employment Reports, Illinois data over the last 5 or so years. We've seen a lot of growth. We've seen 30% growth essentially in solar jobs over the last 5 years. If you look at job postings, which is an indicator of demand, of hiring demand, job postings have more than doubled over the last 5 years. We've seen a 21% growth in construction apprenticeships, in part due to the tremendous clean energy development that we've seen. And we've made strides in developing CEJA and FEJA workforce and contractor programs. Those programs are now training hundreds of people each year for clean energy jobs in Illinois. And we have a policy at the state and federal level that has really supported Illinois' clean energy momentum. In Illinois, we've had 3 major pieces of legislation that have really set the gold standard for the country in terms of clean energy, proactive clean energy policy. We had FEJA, the Future Energy Jobs Act in 2016, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, CEJA in 2021, and then just this fall, we passed the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act, which I think demonstrates Illinois' continued commitment to climate and clean energy goals. And at the federal level, we've also been supported by clean energy policy, especially the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed during the Biden administration. This expansive piece of legislation provided a lot of funding for clean energy projects, but unfortunately, as we're going to talk about today, a lot of the funding is going to be ending. The investments will be ending a lot sooner than expected due to some of the rollbacks that we're seeing, especially through the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was passed this summer. So what I'd like to consider here today is, can we support Illinois' clean energy momentum even without some of these federal investments? Do we have the infrastructure? Do we have the will in Illinois to continue our momentum, to continue to support and grow our workforce, even if some of these federal policies are being rolled back? I'm not going to take time to go into details because I think most of our audience knows all of this by now, but just wanted to summarize very quickly the tax credits that were implemented in the Inflation Reduction Act that are now being rolled back or that are ending sooner than expected. The big ones, this isn't an exhaustive list, but these are the ones that a lot of people that we talk to have been focusing on. The clean electricity investment tax credit being phased out for solar and wind projects. Those projects need to be placed in service by December 31st, by the end of 2027, or begin construction by July 2026 to receive a longer period of time to access those credits. Residential clean energy credits and EV credits are ending even sooner. Residential credits will be ending at the end of this year, and new and used electric vehicle credits have already ended. So some of these impacts are having these credits are having these credit rollbacks are having large impacts on the projects that are being developed. Many of them covered up to 30% of project costs. So if you think about the impact, what that means often is fewer projects are going to be developed, or they're going to be more expensive to develop. There is a silver lining. Some of the credits do remain for certain clean energy technologies, including battery storage, geothermal, and nuclear. And then credits for residential solar remain longer for solar leases. But also want to flag here that foreign entity of concern requirements are creating additional barriers to accessing these credits. So what we wanted to learn, we wanted to, first of all, explore the immediate and anticipated impacts of these tax credit rollbacks. What challenges do businesses and consumers face in the race to meet expiring credits? How are businesses and workers adapting? And what solutions would help businesses, workers, and communities impacted by the rollbacks? So the Climate Jobs Institute, we conducted 3 listening sessions in the fall with 142 people. About a third of them represented clean energy industry and labor. We also had representatives from workforce programs, state agencies, community advocacy groups attend our sessions. We also conducted 27 interviews with solar workers and contractors, and we've published the results of these listening sessions and interviews in a report that we shared with all of you when you registered. We hope you'll take time to read it, read the policy implications from that. We'll be sharing a few highlights today and looking for some discussion from our panelists. I also want to thank our co-authors, Jonathan Hedinger, Ava Fisher, and Bernard Zamakuma, who helped write this report, and thank Climate Jobs Illinois, the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, and DCEO for helping to develop the framework for our study and recruit people for our listening sessions. And finally, I want to thank all of you who participated. We're excited to share what we learned from all of you who participated in these sessions and interviews. First point I want to emphasize is that clean energy development has not slowed down since the tax credit, since the bill was passed. In fact, we're seeing a race to access the expiring credits. Some of them are ending very soon. Some of them will end in the next few years. And there are a number of barriers that developers and contractors are facing in meeting these deadlines to access the expiring credits. We list a few of the barriers here: slow interconnection processes, permitting and siting challenges were probably the most mentioned barriers to accessing these credits. Other barriers included securing financing or grants, supply chain challenges or competition to purchase materials, and then finally, a finite labor pool, only so many workers to complete the projects before the deadline, and then uncertainty regarding the federal changes, some of the guidelines that are coming out in terms of the foreign entity of concern. So up here at the top, I have a quote from one of the participants that kind of illustrates how challenging it is for some projects to meet the deadlines to access these credits. There's a lot of stages. You have to do the financing, you have to do the permitting, you have to get an interconnection agreement back, which could take years. So it's really jeopardizing the eligibility of those projects for the ITC. We asked participants about the project impacts. Many participants feared a boom and bust cycle where demand would spike before the deadlines and then drop off sharply. But also want to note that others were very optimistic. We heard from one, the sky's not falling. We're going to get through this low and then we'll get back to where we need to be because of the necessity of clean, renewable energy. People feared that some projects that are still in the development phase would never get off the ground. We also heard concerns about equity. So for the Solar for All program, you have to reach a certain savings threshold, and they worried about meeting that threshold without the ITC. We asked about business and worker impacts. We wanted to know what was happening now. Were people still hiring? Were people ramping up? Were they anticipating having to lay off workers? And again, we heard a range of responses. Most businesses we talked to were modifying their growth projections. Some were no longer hiring or already laying off workers, but a lot of them were continuing to ramp up and working hard to meet those deadlines. We heard some businesses were selling off projects that they didn't feel like they could complete in time. And then overall, over and over again, we heard that small businesses and equity eligible contractors were anticipated to be hardest hit. So again, here's a few quotes from some of the people we heard from. If you're going to invest in hiring employees and training them, you have to have the certainty that things aren't going to change. Without that, it's very hard for a contractor to say, we're going to man up and take advantage of this market. So again, modifying growth, hesitancy to hire new workers. We heard from a small business, without the ITC leverage, I feel like my small emerging business is just too risky. I don't have all of the connections. We heard from people who were talking about small businesses selling off projects to larger firms who have more capacity. The big guys, they've got enough money to muscle through this. We also heard inspiring stories of how businesses are adapting, how they're shifting course, how they're working together to address some of the policy changes. And some of the ways they were doing that, again, exercising caution, but also diversifying services and coordinating with others. One person said, we're dealing with folks that know this business and have a desire to stay alive until the climate changes around this issue. Some people were talking about going into more operations and maintenance or general construction. Others were interested in diversifying into energy storage systems or solar leases where credits remain for a longer period of time. We want to focus today particularly and with our panel on state solutions that can support clean energy. So I've talked about some of the impacts. We asked participants what they felt like the state could do or even was already doing to support them as they try to access the expiring credits And then what to do after they expire. How can we continue our clean energy momentum after those credits are gone? And solutions generally fell into these 5 categories. Number 1, accelerate project development. Number 2, support workers and contractors. Number 3, fill funding gaps. Number 4, improve information sharing and coordination. And number 5, advance proactive energy policies. So I'll briefly talk about some of what we heard and then look forward to some of our panelists expanding further on some of these ideas, and also encourage you to go to our report to learn more. Given that many of these tax credits are expiring over the next few years, we heard a lot of concern about those barriers, those processes that were slowing projects down. Participants wanted to see the state streamline and simplify permitting and siting processes, expedite utility interconnection studies, accelerate CEJA grant processes, increase rec block capacity so that more projects can get in the pipeline before these tax credits expire, and then support bulk purchases to safe harbor projects. Essentially, projects can receive the tax credits for a longer time period if they purchase a certain percentage of a project's materials by 2026. So one person said, if Ameren could initiate studies on these projects now, we're talking interconnection studies, we may be able to begin construction in time to preserve ITC eligibility. Second, participants overwhelmingly talked about the need to fill funding gaps. So if you think about if these ITC credits are covering 30% of a project's cost, that's a big gap in funding for these projects. So participants talked about adjusting renewable energy credit values, expanding financing options, and we'll talk a little bit about that with our panelists, and increasing access to state grant funding. A couple quotes from our participants. The economics change and the developers aren't building as much solar, they're going to have to adjust those recs in order to make the economics work. The state should create innovative financing mechanisms to support solar project development. There was a fair amount of concern about what's going to happen to the workers. And, if we're investing in these workforce programs that are training people, are they going to have jobs? So we asked participants if they had solutions or ideas to support this. They talked about the important need to bridge the gap between employment and training to help the CEJA and FEJA workforce programs better connect to the employers to understand the demand for jobs, make sure that they were training people for jobs that were there. They talked about shifting training priorities to cover skills that would be relevant across a variety of clean energy jobs, or lead people into apprenticeships in the building trades. They talked about supporting contractors and local workforce pipelines, helping to provide grants to those contractors so that they could hire people and train people. And here you can see a few examples from our participants. We're focused on skill-based trainings. I'm helping them to look at how they've gained skills that can be crossed over into other professions. And one workforce grantee talked about struggling to connect to the employers. We reached out to every single company on a list that was provided, and literally no one responded. It would be helpful to facilitate connections with employers. Related to that, people wanted to see improved information sharing and coordination. Felt like this would really support the clean energy workforce, clean energy development in general, but particularly now that the tax credits are expiring. They wanted to see consolidated information and guidance. Right now, we've got information spread out across a lot of different places. They wanted to see guidance about new federal entity of concern requirements. And they wanted to see better coordination across the state agencies that are administering our CEJA programs. Related to that workforce piece, they wanted to have a centralized matchmaking place where trainees can connect to employers and get jobs. They wanted to see the state track progress, share data, and then adapt if needed. You know, if the jobs aren't there, let's adapt, let's find ways to move forward. And then finally, provide assistance, especially to small businesses and EECs who may struggle, equity eligible contractors who may struggle. So a couple quotes. Everything is moving quickly. Information is changing all the time. People are busy and they don't know who to talk to when. And then, you know, emphasizing that coordination piece. You're funding the workforce development side, you're funding the employer side, you're funding the infrastructure side. How do you get all those different systems to better work with each other? And then finally, we heard a fair amount that people wanted the state of Illinois to continue to advance proactive clean energy policies. And we'll note that we were conducting this research before the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act was passed. So people had this on their mind. They wanted to see the state invest in battery storage since those credits remain for a longer period of time. Likewise, thermal energy networks, geothermal, again, credits remain for those. Wanted to see the state invest in grid modernization and continue to invest in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and then better planning across different utilities and sectors. And we'll have a chance to learn from some of our panelists about the proactive clean energy policy that's been passed. Okay, that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jonathan, who's going to lead our discussion with our 5 panelists. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. And yeah, I'm Jonathan Hettinger. I'm the communications director at the Climate Jobs Institute and helped with this report. I think this report has been really exciting just because it's felt really timely, and there's been so many different people that really want to talk about this. And I'm glad that we have the panelists here to help have that discussion. So first, we're going to start with Kai. Kai Ajayi spent 20 years as an environmental consultant, 15 years as a university professor, now 6 in renewable energy. He's the owner of Central Road Energy, a renewable energy contractor aggregator in the Illinois Solar for All program, and serves as the solar access manager for Straight Up Solar. In both of those roles, he's ensuring marginalized communities are served by the clean energy economy in Illinois. So, Kai, from your vantage point as a solar employer, how are the federal tax credit rollbacks influencing project timelines, hiring, and day-to-day operations right now? And how is everyone adapting?
Timelines are crunched. We have until the end of the year to safe harbor commercial projects, either through the 5% of the project cost, or for those projects over 1.5 megawatts AC through a beginning of construction method. So there's a mad rush to try to get commercial projects safe harbored by the end of the year and protect them against FEOC requirements, which are an unknown at the moment. Residential is done when it comes to owner-owned residential. If it's not built by the end of this year, then you know federal tax credit for you. And in terms of adapting to that market, we are trying to roll out a lease program because as a third-party owner, you can still take advantage of the 30% tax credit. So that's our adaptation on the residential side. On the commercial side, it's get as much done as soon as you can, safe harbor it in 25. And then in 26, the next cliff is 4th of July. So what can you safe harbor before then, in terms of how long you have to build it. If you can safe harbor by then, you've got 4 years. But the big unknown is FIOC. What is that going to do to costs? What is it going to do to the availability of equipment? These are just unknowns that we cannot really plan for. We have to wait and see what government is going to come out with.
Yeah, so what kind of supports would make the most difference for businesses, especially equity eligible contractors right now, whether that's financial, administrative, workforce related?
It's so tough because uncertainty is the key. So the biggest help we can get is not so much from our local folks, but from the federal government. Can you tell us what the rules are so we know how to play? All right. Without that, you talk about hiring. We have a hiring freeze. We're doing the best that we can to keep people employed. But if you can't plan for what you can build in the future, how do you expand your workforce, which we want to do? We want to go to the workforce development folks and pull people in. We just can't afford to do that right now. All we can do is keep the folks that we have on the books working and hope and pray that we get some guidance soon. So I don't honestly, I've racked my brain. What can happen right now? You provide, if the recs go up and make it a little more cost effective to move forward with projects, but you're losing 30% of the project cost with the ITC going away. Recs cannot make up for that. You're going to borrow money. Borrowing money cannot make up for that. When you look at your capital stack, you take 30% of that away, it's very difficult to come back from that.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that especially that information thing was that sharing was something we've heard again and again, and then in a lot of um, the analysis that we did looked at increasing recs, but that comes with all those questions that you just brought up. I'm gonna go to Rebeccah now. Rebeccah Sanders is the executive director of the Clean Energy Jobs and Justice Fund, which is Illinois' nonprofit green bank. Established through CEJA, the fund ensures that frontline communities and minority-led clean energy businesses can fully participate in and benefit from the state's transition to a clean energy economy. Rebeccah leads efforts to make this transition inclusive and community-centered, fostering green job opportunities and supporting energy and efficiency projects led by those most impacted by climate change. She brings a deep cross-sector background in community and environmental advocacy, having served as the executive director of the Chicago Cultural Alliance and as chief field and strategy officer at the National Audubon Society. In all her work, Rebeccah centers equity, collaboration, and the elevation of community voice. So, Rebeccah, I know that you've been collecting data on some of these stalled projects. What are you seeing? Where are the funding gaps that are emerging most clearly?
Jonathan, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm so excited to be here. Though this isn't the most fun topic for any of us to talk about as we're thinking about the trajectory that we have been on in Illinois. The one piece of encouragement I would say is that I work with green banks across the country, and in comparison, we are better positioned because of the investment Illinois has made in clean energy and with a focus and deep emphasis on equity, but I think that is significantly at risk with the changes to the ITC. Um, as Linda shared through the report, right, there's this feeling that there is momentum moving forward, but there are businesses that are better positioned to manage through this moment. So when we think about this, those more established solar energy businesses that have been around longer, that have greater access to capital, they're already thinking about 26, 27, 28, and perhaps what's going to change if there's a change in federal energy policy in a few years. But the equity eligible contractors don't necessarily have that same luxury. So many people created businesses because of the promise of CEJA. And what we're seeing is that many of those businesses were already highly leveraged. They are emerging businesses, so banks already consider them higher risk for investment before the change to the ITC. And then many of these businesses face sort of the impacts of historic discrimination in lending. And so we're already stacking all of those up, and now we've lost that 30%, as Kai said, and there's a huge gap in financing here. What we're starting to see is that one, contractors are thinking differently about how they are going to work together and how they're going to maintain and develop their projects. So Linda mentioned earlier, selling off projects to larger developers, larger companies. That is an opportunity for people to continue their businesses. But again, there will be an impact in the wealth building opportunity that CEJA promised if people aren't able to develop the projects in the way that keep them in community-based and MBE ownership. We're also seeing the cost of capital. We're not just losing that 30%, but banks are losing the security that 30% provided to them in thinking about their financing. So capital is getting more expensive for everyone. And a green bank often leverages its dollars by providing some protection, some security to banks to say, take a risk on this. We'll take the first loss through something like a loan loss reserve, providing concessionary capital. That used to be able to get us 10, 15 times more of an impact, perhaps. Now we're looking at 2 or 3 times what we're able to offer, and the cost of that capital has gone up. So instead of maybe an 8% rate, we're seeing a 12% rate, 14% rate, which just puts that money out of reach for many of these businesses. So I think what we're going to see in the long run, right now, we're seeing everybody try to rush towards safe harbor. We're seeing a lot of support from philanthropy and some opportunities for private investment. But I think if we were here in another year talking about what has happened based on this first year and change to ITC, what we're going to see is that there's going to be a consolidation of projects, that we're going to have fewer projects developed and owned by minority-led businesses, and that there are going to be fewer projects in frontline communities.
So, are there solutions that you're thinking about with financing and capacity building? I know you mentioned that, but I mean, is there any more detail about how we can help fill this gap right now?
What we think about every day, Jonathan.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of different ways to slice the pie. As Kai said, the 30%, that's a pretty big chunk of a project's capital missing. That wasn't capital that was being loaned, right? That was just a part of that capital stack. So we're thinking about a couple of different things. One, mentioned in the report, and probably the most important thing, is just finding ways for the state to provide more capital. And, for us, we think about capital we need to be able, again, to leverage and provide security to traditional financial institutions to lower the cost of capital and get more money out the door to businesses throughout Illinois. Climate Bank is also thinking about those same things, I imagine. We're thinking also about market building solutions. So not just thinking about community solar, but as the tax credit for commercial goes away and people there's the opportunity to move to leasing, but there's also thinking about how we maintain businesses in these communities. So can we pair working capital with also affordable capital for people to invest in energy efficiency and for rooftop solar, for example. So we can continue to build businesses in the communities that are most vulnerable, but also make that accessible to folks that maybe don't meet the economic thresholds to meet all the state incentives and rebates, but don't have the credit history to be able to get a traditional like a home improvement loan that would fund these things. And I think on the technical assistance and sort of programmatic side, what we're seeing a lot in our conversation with contractors, and we spend a lot of time talking to the EECs, trying to think through what we're going to do together. And we're seeing a lot of effort on collaboration. So can we think about shared back office services? How do we make legal costs and accounting costs more affordable? How do we continue to partner with EECs and other businesses throughout the state to help them be prepared to their best position when they are going to banks? And that may mean first loans come from CGIF and from sort of the state entities. They can build their credit history, and then they are better positioned to go to traditional financial institutions. Um, and thinking about things like shared purchasing and also support on how to think about shifting into batteries and incorporating battery storage in your projects. But in the end, I think, Jonathan, all comes down to capital and finding ways to bring more capital into the institutions in the state so that we can get those out, that money out to the companies around the state of Illinois that we've been building and investing in for the last several years.
Great. So I put in the chat, but if anyone else has questions for the panelists, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm going to go to Hilary and then Bob. Hilary Scott-Ogurinde is the Deputy Director of Energy and Utility at the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, where she plays a vital role in advancing sustainable energy initiatives. With a distinguished career spanning the construction, healthcare, and energy sectors, she successfully led teams in designing, developing, and financing innovative projects that drive environmental, economic, and social impact. A passionate advocate for environmental justice, she's dedicated to fostering economic opportunities in historically underserved communities across Illinois and Missouri. And so, Hilary, from DCEO's perspective, what impacts are you seeing or anticipating from the federal tax credit rollbacks on CEJA programs and grantees?
The impacts I'm seeing have already been expressed. They're in the report. Kai covered them. I'm experiencing grantees saying that I can't finance this project any longer due to, the tax credits no longer available. I can't move. I can't receive capital fast enough to be able to safe harbor things or to complete the things that are needed in an effort to get to safe harbor. So everything that I'm experiencing has already been stated. So before I go into what I would think the next question would be, Jonathan, I'll let you ask the question.
I mean, the question I was going to ask is how does the CEJA programs help keep these projects and workforce pipelines on track during this period?
Yeah, the CEJA ecosystem that the community really drove to develop, I mean, community developed the elements of CEJA, right? So the tools are there. The tools are there because there's funding for project development. The tools are there because there's funding for contractor support and addressing the skilled labor availability. So the tools are there. What I believe is missing is we've got the macro set of tools and a strategy or understood methodology of deploying and implementing those tools. What we have yet to get to at this moment is that micro level of deployment of those tools in those specific communities. So what do I mean by that? I mean the workforce hub, sitting at the table with the local municipality, sitting at the table with the economic development organization, sitting at the table with the CEJA ecosystem, and sitting at the table with business, sitting at the table with the EECs, sitting at the table with the large industrial entity. So the moment we get a strategy locally, we can adapt to the environment no matter what it is. This past year, it's the federal government. Next year, it could be the environment itself. The following year after that, I mean, who knows? But it's just like your household. When mommy and daddy are clear about the plan or about the vision, and then they have the plan. When something happens, if they're communicating and the vision is clear, then somehow it all works out. So, in short, not to be elementary, we got to find the mommies and daddies in every community that we are servicing. Or if you want to go to a team, we got to find the general manager, the head coach, and all the other, coaches responsible for training the players and therefore training the players to be successful, which is to get as many touchdowns as possible to win the game. So I would say let's leave from here thinking about who are my local coaches. And then once the coaches have a plan, let's talk to the GM, AKA the state where the money's coming from, and say, hey, this is what we need. And this is how you can help utilize the CEJA ecosystem, the EPA's money, IPA's money, the new bill. I mean, this is how we want to use that money to execute XYZ in our community to get the touchdowns and win the game.
Thank you, Hilary. I love that football and both analogies, but the team analogy and the family analogy. I like it. Thank you. And so I am gonna go to Robert Hattier, who is the Director of Renewable Energy for IBEW Local 134. He also serves as the Executive Director for Illinois IBEW Renewable Energy Fund, a state of Illinois grant-funded workforce development organization authorized under the Future Energy Jobs Act. Bob has over 25 years of experience in the solar energy and adjacent technology industries. Since 2008, Bob has been teaching courses on solar, wind, energy storage, and electrical vehicle charging systems throughout the Midwest. So, Bob, what I've been wondering from you is how do you see the CEJA and FEJA programs being impacted right now? Are you making any adjustments in training or otherwise?
Yeah, Jonathan, that's a great question, and thank you for having me on, and thank you to the rest of the Climate Jobs Institute team. So, as a FEJA funded program, we are still running, and we have been continuing to recruit new participants from all over the state. As it comes to changes, well, first, before we get into changes, we're still full steam ahead because we see this as yes, there are some direct impacts that are going to be felt right away on funding availability and project resources. But not to extend the cliche that's been used a lot, but this is just another turn on the solar coaster. This industry is not going anywhere. And with our demand for power only set to increase, we will see in our state and the surrounding area continued growth in this industry. But I'll say from the training front, recruiting front, we don't have a shortage of people interested in the program. So we're still, again, we are reaching out to more communities to make sure that opportunity is available everywhere. But on the training side, we continuously update our curriculum to not only code changes, but industry best practice and industry innovation. And energy storage, obviously, is something that's been discussed a lot. It's, part of the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act. If I got that right, someone should have came up with something that ended in EJA, so it was a lot easier to say. But with that focus, we know that work is going to increase. Now, energy storage work is happening without that bill. The data centers all incorporate battery storage. We have electric vehicle infrastructure for fleets that are incorporating these technologies. So what we're likely to see and are seeing now is just more commercial use of it and expanded residential use of energy storage. So in our next incarnation of the curriculum that we train our instructors across the state, we will see an increased focus there. But that's not the only change in the industry. We're seeing energy management systems coming in, and we're seeing more interconnected systems across the board. So I guess I look at this as an electrician coming from the electrical industry, all of these electrical systems are continuously evolving. So therefore, our curriculum is continuously evolving. The one not unforeseen, but benefit that's materialized since Illinois passed FEJA and CEJA and now the current bill is the excitement in this innovation is really drawing people to our industry because these are critical infrastructure jobs. These are jobs that aren't going anywhere. And what we offer is not just that job, it's that career. So when we have the slowdowns in certain aspects of our industry, other areas are always rising. And we have continuous work opportunity for our membership out there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what opportunities do you see coming out of Surja, but you kind of touched on that. I don't know if you want to elaborate anymore, if you feel, or um, just as we go more toward electrification, if it sounds like there's still a lot of opportunity here.
There's definitely a lot of opportunity. I mean, electrification for transportation, obviously that infrastructure, even with those the tax credits for purchasing the vehicles going away, we still have the NEVI funds are about to get it released again. There's still infrastructure funding available. We also still have, because of CEJA, we still have incentives available through the Illinois EPA that locally in this state. So I guess maybe not exactly what you're asking about. Illinois is doing what it needs to do. And it's almost like a blessing in disguise that the energy bill that just passed did not go through in the spring because it was more informed to the state of the industry for what just passed recently in the fall session.
So that brings me to Kavi. Kavi Chintam is the campaign manager for Illinois at Vote Solar. In this role, Kavi works to advance clean energy legislation and engages in coalitions to promote equitable and just measures. So, Kavi, how does SURJA, or the Energy Omnibus Bill, I'm not sure what we're calling it, address some of the challenges that were raised here today?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan, and thanks so much for having me here. Um, Bob really built up a good foundation for me to jump off of here. The the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act, when it started to be built a few years ago, it was in a much different environment. And I think in the past year, the environment has changed for two main reasons. One being federal rollbacks and a tax on clean energy, and two being the advent of data centers and bringing more stress to our grid. So those two things have made the urgency of passing that bill extremely high. And as Bob said, yeah, in some ways we were able to get some more wins in passing it in fall because even between May and October, the landscape had shifted drastically. So some of the things that are in Surja are, well, everything in Surja is meant to keep the grid cleaner, make sure it's reliable in times of high demand, and make sure that bills stay low for folks across the state. And in all of that, there's also the undertone of ensuring that our clean energy economy in Illinois is strong and that folks who have built businesses because of the successes of FEJA and CEJA aren't suddenly left with insolvent businesses because of the impacts of the federal government. So some of the key provisions in the Surja Act, include battery storage. That's kind of the next big thing in ensuring that our clean energy can be as reliable as possible for folks across the country. And so Illinois is really leading in that now by requiring the state to procure 3 gigawatts of energy by 2030. I'll also mention that the virtual power plant program, which essentially can take advantage of a bunch of residential and local storage and other things eventually, but primarily storage next year, will also help build out the residential storage industry because folks can get compensated for providing services back to the grid. And relatedly, with storage and with solar and wind and everything, what Illinois hasn't had, we have these huge bills that we pass every few years, but what we haven't had is consistent planning that the state does. So integrated resource planning is a really important part of the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act. When I entered this field, I was shocked that Illinois doesn't do any planning like that. It seems like a very common sense thing to do. And so now the state is going to be able to figure out what mix of resources and how much of a certain resource is necessary to meet demand as unexpected things happen, like the rise in data centers, like federal attacks. We'll be able to better adapt to changing things. And importantly, like I mentioned, the storage goal we have, I haven't mentioned yet, but like the increase in solar that we'll be able to get from this bill, the integrated resource plan will make sure that those goals still make sense in a couple of years and will be able to let us like plan ahead, to have goals that meet changing atmospheres. The bill also, one of the big things that I think it does for businesses and for the clean energy economy in Illinois is it adds money to the Renewable Portfolio Standard, the RPS. This is super important to have an infusion of cash there as more businesses are building and in the presentation Linda gave at the beginning, the booming clean energy economy we have in Illinois is great, but that also means we need more money to make it happen. And this bill does a lot by essentially adding 5 gigs of solar specifically to the grid by 2030. The bill also has a number of other things to keep costs low for folks, so energy efficiency rebates. Also, in terms of clean energy businesses, updating transmission lines is super important so that when projects are built, they can actually be connected to the grid quickly. So this bill allows for transmission lines to be upgraded so that they can take on more clean energy power. And the last thing I'll mention is a lot of the work I do at Boat Solar, a lot of the work we do within the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition really centers on equity. So we worked super closely with EECs to make sure that this bill would actually help them keep their businesses afloat. So one of the things, again, that Linda mentioned was technical assistance for EECs. Surja has $7 million of funding that goes towards them every single year to help with technical assistance. It also funds the Kankakee Hub, which is a workforce hub. So there are a few things that will specifically help EECs, in addition to the general things that will help the clean energy industry in the state as well.
And as much as we all wish one bill could solve all of the problems, what other strategies do we need to do to help maintain some of this momentum and protect the equity goals?
Yeah, I think in addition to the legislative route, the regulatory route is super important. Kai mentioned rec prices and adjusting those to help folks, which can't necessarily fulfill the entire 30% tax credit loss, but can help mitigate that a little bit. So that is one thing in the regulatory route, just one example of something that can help. Additionally, Rebeccah's work is super important in capitalizing funds like that to make sure that we're supporting the most vulnerable communities and the businesses that need the most help is very important. So I think making sure that we're allocating funds where they need to go in a time when there are these attacks happening is very important. And I'll also say that, like I mentioned, one of the things that really made Surja so urgent, aside from federal action, is data centers. So continuing with legislation that we're hoping to introduce in the spring to make sure data centers are responsible consumers and responsible residents of the Illinois economy will be very important. And I think there's some opportunities there to, one, make sure that they're contributing to the economy as they say they will, and two, make sure that in the clean energy industry that uh, they are creating jobs for, making more clean energy happen. And they have a lot of money, so adding more money into funds and into the RPS, et cetera, to make sure that companies that are able to build to help support data center development, since that is inevitably happening here, making sure that that happens. So there's some opportunities to make sure that we really make sure equity is at the center of it and not an afterthought.
So I have one final question. Linda told me that Hillary would like this question, or to ask this question because Hillary would like it. What gives you hope, and how can we work together? So, Hillary, do you want to start?
Oh, what gives me hope is my community. I live in an EJ community, and what gives me hope is that I'm not dead yet. And I know that there are plenty of people in my community and around this state who want it to look differently. And because I still have breath in my body and I still have gray matter in between my temples, that means that and I woke up this morning, there's an opportunity to do the work that it takes to live and see and experience something different. And so what I shared about the team is um, what I'm encouraging people to do, and I'm encouraging them to realize that the state is here to drive forward and create the hope that they see, right? We can have it in our head and we can believe it, but people have got to eventually see it and experience it. And so I'm just hoping and believing that we will really sit down at these tables together and work to collectively execute the vision.
Hi, do you want to go next about that?
Sure. What gives me hope is the fact that people see the negative impacts of the policies that have been implemented by this current administration. We've lived the good life in Illinois for the last 9 years since FIJA, and we've just been doing all the things and making great progress. And all of a sudden, it stops, and people see the impact of that, and people are realizing that we need to do things to change this perspective. So Illinois is staying the course, which gives me hope that we as a state, no matter what the feds do, will stay the course and continue to try to do the right thing as it comes to clean energy. And hopefully nationally, people will see the advantages of clean energy and start to vote for policies and policymakers that will support this direction.
Rebeccah?
I think what gives me the greatest hope is how solutions focused we are in Illinois, from the state level down to the community level, down to the business level. And what I have seen in particular from the most at-risk businesses coming together to try to identify solutions together. So thinking about collaboration to rather than consolidation, but really thinking even about how they co-invest and support each other. And to me, that's hope is really important, but hope turned into action is what is going to get us through this. And I'm seeing that happen already, and it happened pretty much immediately when these policies started rolling out.
Great. Yeah. Bob, do you want to add anything on what gives you hope? How we can work together?
Yeah, absolutely. One, I want to echo everything that was already said in the response to this question because it is important, all these perspectives. But the other thing I was thinking about is Illinois' progressive energy policy really started with FIJA. And we learned, FIJA was based on some other states, and we said we could do it better in Illinois. And then when CEJA came around, we could do it even better. And that progress continues regardless of what's happening within the the federal government, which is going to change. And really what I see in this is the success of the vision of FIJA, which was to support this clean energy industry. It's not just clean energy, it's all energy, but you know, it's causing people to look at energy differently. It's not just a bill that they pay every month. It's, wait, I can generate that. There's other ways of generating. Oh, I can store that for a different time, a different use factor, or I can use that for transportation or other loads. So everyone with Fiji always talked about solar and wind, but really it was the beginning of this whole conversation on responsible use and responsible generation of energy in general. And I'm just hopeful that we will continue that path here in Illinois.
Great. Kavi?
Yeah, I deeply believe in people power. I'm an organizer at heart. I organize on the north side of Chicago, and I just think that the good overcomes the bad, which is maybe super naive, but it's what I've seen my whole life. And I think what I've seen over the past year, and probably even more than a year, are people who weren't activated before becoming activated because they're seeing how awful things are. And you can interpret that how you would like. Um, so it gives me a lot of hope to see people turning out. And I'll mention like we had 3 lobby days this year to pass Surge, and the turnout was incredible. And I will brag that my district had the most people. We had like 25 people come out. And it's cool to see, and that is the kind of thing that will make things happen. And having everyone on this panel and in this call caring about this is ultimately what will make things happen, and that always will give me hope.
Yeah, well, thank you to all the panelists. That's exactly what I was thinking was that all the work that's being done by everyone on the panel and on the call and that we talked to really shows how much FIJA and CJA created this atmosphere to be successful and things like that. Yeah, so thank you everybody. Linda, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just say thanks so much to our panelists and again to everyone who participated in our listening sessions and contributed to this report that we've produced. Um, I'm happy to stay on for some questions from the audience. We do have one from William Ryan that I just wanted to make sure we get to. Would we be best off to enlarge the training in the clean energy hubs to include some new energy-oriented areas such as battery installation, HVAC, energy auditing, or others? And I think that was a clear what we heard in our report, and wanted to open it up to some panelists if they have any thoughts about that.
I've long been an advocate of expanding training beyond simply putting people on the roof. And given the fact that putting people on the roof is going to become more difficult with these rollbacks, any diversification of training is going to be very, very useful and I believe well received.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I also want to note there's been a few resources posted in the chat that I think would be helpful, especially to people who are, impacted by these rollbacks, businesses that are impacted. We can share out those resources as we, share the recording of this webinar. Are there any other questions from our audience before we sign off today? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hey, Linda, I had a quick question. This is Todd.
Hi, Todd.
Hey, quick question. So there was some comments about the interconnection process. And so in my old life, I had responsibility for the utility from the interconnection process, which was a bumpy road as things started progressing. But I'm trying to get an idea because I've been away from it for a while. So from the interconnection standpoint, what opportunities does the panel or do you see as being advantageous in helping mitigate some of the challenges that have been outlined in this discussion?
Mm. That's a good question, and some of our panelists may have suggestions as well. And I know the Clean and Reliable Grid Act also addresses some of these challenges with interconnection as well. We did hear a number of people in our report who participated in our listening sessions talked about interconnection processes, speeding the process up. They had some ideas for how Ameren and ComEd could could speed up the process, from everything from hiring more staff to making sure that they ask everything up front so you don't have to go back and forth and collect more information, to doing concurrent studies, to prioritizing projects that are actually ready to move rather than projects that may take a long time or that are more speculative. So those are some of the main things we heard in the report. Wondering if any of our panelists would like to comment.
So what I would offer to the panelists, of whoever wants to reach out to me directly, I have familiarity with ComEd's interconnection process. At one time, I was responsible for it. This was prior to the creation of both FEJA and CEJA, but I'm very familiar with the process. So certainly I can be used as a resource in terms of helping navigate that challenge if so inclined, because I do understand the resource element of it, and there aren't dedicated resources. A lot of time when you have to look at doing engineering studies, because they're tapped on resources as far as having to do going beyond level 1 applications. There are workarounds that need to be created, and I haven't inserted myself in that. When FEJA first came out, I was able to use that relationship as a means of being able to leverage with the inception of FEJA when solar projects were coming in. But quite honestly, I've been away from it for a while, but certainly understand the process. So if anybody wants to, as a resource, certainly, you can reach out. I'll drop my email address in the chat and we can have a conversation. It helps.
Thanks, Todd. Appreciate that. Any other questions from audience before we close today? All right. Well, thank you all for coming. We'll send out a follow-up email with a recording and with some of the links that were shared in the chat, including a link to our report if you want to learn more. And feel free to reach out to us as well if you'd like to have follow-up conversations or talk about the future of clean energy in Illinois and the research that can support that development. Thanks, everyone. Have a good afternoon.